Good. We know why we're here to celebrate one of our heroes, a real pioneer in the field. Everyone knows that. And I know he's had a special impact on many of us, myself included, a trailblazer for many of us, someone we could always call on. I had a conversation with Jerome just about a month or so ago, maybe a little more than a month ago. And I remember having a conversation about his sabbatical, and he wanted to come and spend some time with us here at A&M, and we were actually working it out. And I remember he was a little frustrated. He said, COVID just messed up everything. Otherwise, I'd be on the road and I'd be out with you all and visiting. But that was my last conversation. I know many of us had our last conversations with Jerome. We all miss him in very important ways. And so tonight, we're going to celebrate his life. And I don't know if Lillian is with us tonight, but I know KB, we are recording. So she will get a copy of this. And Gail and I have been asked to be the moderators. And so, as you know, many of you have been moderators. Our biggest challenge is to keep the time, right? Make sure we stay on time. We all have a lot to say. And so KB has given us instructions. We're going to try to keep it to about 5 minutes each. And Gail, I think, is going to be the timekeeper. So we can go ahead and get started. Gail, would you like to welcome everyone?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dean Jones. It's my esteemed honor and pleasure to be here with you all this evening and to share this moderating opportunity with our beloved Dean Eli Jones. We are here because we all love Jerome Williams. Jerome Williams has touched the lives of many, and I would say every one of us on this screen in different ways. When I think about my personal reflections, I can't even remember when I first met Jerome. It goes back that far. It was to doctoral days. And I don't have any professional memories of being a scholar and not having Jerome Williams in my life. So like many of us, I do have the hole in my heart, but I also have the love and the legacy that he's left with me to push forward. So tonight, we could have had thousands of people to be able to share their reflections about how Jerome has impacted them. But we decided to select our Kevin Bradford helped to organize this session, and he selected people to represent different eras. So the early era, so people who were colleagues or classmates or friends with Jerome for an extended period of time. And then we have his young, we like to think of ourselves as still young, but his early mentees and the impact that Jerome had on us and our careers and where we are today. And then we're going to wrap it up with some of his younger or his newer mentees. And we even have one of his doctoral student who will talk to us about how he impacted her life directly. So we're going to go through and we'll just have everyone just share their thoughts, as Eli said, roughly between 5 and 8 minutes or so that they can just share a little bit into the legacy and the impact that Jerome has had on each one of their lives. So to get us started, I will let you know who our speakers will be tonight so that you can know who's coming in front of you and who will be speaking. And after each speaker shares their thoughts, they will pass it off to the next speaker. So our first speaker this evening, and we have to start with our godfather. Yeah. Bill Qualls is known as the godfather by many of us, and he goes way back in terms of his relationship with Jerome. Bill is Professor Emeritus of Marketing from the University of Illinois. We will also have Jose Antonio Rosa, who will also share some thoughts as one of Jerome's earlier colleagues and friends. Jose is the Professor of Marketing and the John and Deborah Gayno Faculty Fellow at Iowa State University. I'm not sure if Thad Spratlin was able to make it with us this evening, but we'll give out a shout out to Thad, who shares the Williams Qualls Spratlin Mentor Fellowship that is given out in their name. And Thad is Professor Emeritus of Marketing from the University of Washington. And then we have my personal mentor, Miriam Stamps. And Mimi is Associate Professor of Emeritus of Marketing from the University of South Florida. And then we shift into a newer phase or a those of us who got to be mentees of Jerome very early in our career. And my dear friend Sonya Grier will share her comments. Sonya is professor of marketing at American University, and she met Jerome as a doctoral student way back in 1992. We have Vanessa Perry, who will also share words. Vanessa is professor of marketing, strategic management, and public policy, as well as the associate dean of faculty and research at the George Washington University School of Business. We have Americus Reed. Americus Reed is the Whitney M. Young Jr. Professor of Marketing at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. Maura Scott will then kind of round out that phase of mentees of Jerome. Maura is the Paris E. Rockwood Professor of Marketing at the Florida State University. And then we will have the pleasure of hearing from Aziza Jones. We all love Aziza. Aziza is the current president of the Marketing Doctoral Student Association, and she is a 6-year marketing candidate, at the Rutgers University. And then we will have closing remarks from our last speaker, who will be Nakeisha Lewis. Nakeisha is the Associate Dean of Undergraduate and Accelerated Master's Programs at the University of St. Thomas. So we all look forward to hearing the thoughts and the words and the sentiments shared by all of us. I said Jerome has been a legacy, a mentor, but he has been a friend to all of us. So on that note, I'd love to turn it over to the Godfather, to Bill Qualls, to start us off this evening.
Thanks, Gail. And thanks to everyone helping us to celebrate Jerome's life and sharing, honoring a true scholar, friend, mentor, and man. But I really want to give a special thanks to the true godfather of marketing research, Don Lehman. I think we've all learned and read from his books, and so I don't want to take that title away from him. Jerome and I have been best friends for almost 40 years. We met by chance at a conference in Singapore, and I was an assistant professor at Michigan, and he was a doctoral student at Colorado. We met at a meet and greet, and I walked up to him in his group, and he was wearing his normal Hawaiian print shirt. And given that context, I was expecting to hear a Malaysian accent, but instead, when he spoke, it was an American Philly accent. And that was the backdrop of a friendship that developed that has lasted for these 40 years. And we've used each other as sounding boards to vent, to share advice based upon our experiences in academia, but we also ended up mentoring each other. We found that we had similar values and that we felt the same way about a lot of things. One of the things was the family always came first. And we both had the privilege of having very strong and supportive wives. Lillian, if most of you haven't met her, if you saw Jerome at a conference, you would see Lillian. And that was a demonstration of not only his context with his family, but also the context of the love that he had for that particular woman. When I think of Jerome, I remember how much he pushed himself to the limits, whether he was pushing himself as a scholar in terms of his research or his running in terms of marathons. He kept pushing himself to move forward to take that next step. As you know, Jerome ran in a number of different Boston marathons. And while I was at MIT, he would come and stay with us because we stayed near the starting point, 26 miles outside of Boston. And several times he would bring his son, Dante, and Dante would travel with us to the 7-mile mark in Framingham. And that's where Jerome would give us the high sign in terms of whether he think he was up to finishing the race. So if we thought we saw him, he saw his high sign, he would then go on to finish the race and we would go to Boston to pick him up. So this went on for several years, except for one year, the boys got tired of waiting. and they wanted to go see a movie. So rather than going to see Jerome give us the high sign, we went to the movie. Unbeknownst to me, that was the year he got hurt. And he was looking for us in framing hands left and right. He didn't see us, but as Jerome is in terms of his life, he kept going and he did finish the race. So one of the things you could always depend on Jerome is he's a finisher. He finishes what he starts. And if you work with him on a project, you know that he would push you to do your best to finish that particular project. But more than just a simple risk taker, Jerome has a generous soul, as I'm sure many of you can attest to. He never met a person in need that he did not find some way of helping, whether it was doctoral students, people on the street. That was the type of person he is. I haven't told this story to very many people, but one of the reasons I wanted to obtain my PhD is I read some research about Negroes and marketing and advertising to Negroes in the 70s. That was the word that they used at that time. And I wanted to challenge some of those assumptions. However, when I was in my doctoral program, I was discouraged from pursuing that topic as a research area because it was not part of the mainstream. As a result, I focused and changed my research more to organizational group and family decision making. But one other thing about Jerome, his commitment to studying the intersection between ethnicity, consumer, and marketing started with his dissertation, and that has been his path ever since. He can be credited with bringing ethnicity and marketing into the mainstream of marketing thought. And with bringing that to the mainstream of marketing thought, he not only brought his own research, but he brought a community of scholars. Spoke earlier and said that he has over 100 co-authors in which he's worked with during that time frame. And each of those co-authors have focused on this idea of the intersection between ethnicity and marketing. Now, I had the privilege of being invited early in my career of being a co-author with him on an article called Middle Class Black Consumers and the Intensity of Ethnic Identification. And I came to know that what motivated Jerome was the research was based upon a lot of personal experiences that he had. And those personal experiences led him to want to understand and put a framework of understanding, not just for himself, but for others. And that research led to an impact not only in terms of marketing thought, but in terms of public policy. So we both believe that one of the things that was our responsibility as being one of the few in academia at the time was to bring others through the doors that we entered, and sometimes entered first, whether it was doors in academia, research, consulting, or the field of marketing, or the service to the field of marketing. We opened doors for each other. And after opening those doors for each other, we made sure and made a commitment that others would be able to come through those doors as well. So he's not only had an impact on me and other professors, but numerous doctoral students. No matter where he went, that institution, you saw a change in the institution in terms of the number of doctoral students of color, as well as the number of faculty. He found a way to bring about change that not only benefited his research, but benefited the environment as well. So when you combine the facts that Jerome was compassionate soul and willing to take risks, well, he's not able to accomplish what he was without the support of his wife. Because no matter where in the world he went, and he went a lot of places, she was always there to help him, and not just as a wife, but as a research assistant, and often as a participant in the research that we did. So one of the articles that we wrote on racially exclusive advertising, she actually posed as the model for the pictures that we used. And it's that type of support that she provided that led to this union of the perfect couple that I always try to emulate. And a lot of you know Pam, and we try to do the same things that Jerome did. Now, you may not know, but you probably have heard that Jerome was a huge music fan, especially of male singing groups. He thought of himself as an entertainer. He thought he could dance, he thought he could sing, and he would hang out with the young people, so to speak, all the time and prove that he could do those things. Okay. So I try to think of music that would capture his spirit. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to sing. I don't have the talent that Jerome does. But I wanted to think of a song that would capture his spirit in the way that he lived his life. And one of the songs that came to mind was I Believe I Could Fly. And not the R. Kelly version. I'm talking about Yolanda Adams rendition. So if you haven't ever heard Yolanda sing it, you need to bring it up on YouTube. Because Jerome actually believed he could soar through any open door. And if the door was made available to him, he would take advantage of it. But another song by Yolanda Adams captures his spirit just as well. And I think it offers good advice for other faculty members and other doctoral students who may want to emulate his values and his impact in terms of the discipline. And that song is called Never Give Up by Yolanda Adams. So I'm just going to read some of the passages through and encourage you to actually listen to the song to get the emotion behind the song. And you would feel Jerome in the words that come out. It starts like the vision that can change the world trapped inside an ordinary man. He looked just like you, too afraid to dream out loud. And though it is a simple idea, it will not make sense to everybody. You need courage now if you're going to persevere. To feel a divine first purpose, you got to answer when you're called. So don't be afraid to face the world against all odds. Keep the dream alive. Don't let it die. If something deep inside keeps trying and inspiring you to try, don't stop and never give up. Don't ever give up. Work today to change tomorrow. It gets easier. And who says you can't fly? Every step you take, you get closer to your destination. You can feel it now. Don't you know you're almost there? Never give up on you, because Jerome would never give up on you. Thank you. Tony?
Thank you, Bill. And thank you for inviting me to speak at this very special session. And I want to thank the AMA for working with marketing scholars like all the distinguished panelists and the moderators, and executive producer Kevin Bradford, who has done a tremendous amount of work, and many other people who have been involved in honoring our comrade and friend Jerome Williams. The kind words that Bill has shared, the many people that are already in attendance, and the likely countless nods and agreement that that have been offered in homes and offices, I think they all bear witness to Jerome's immense contributions to equity, diversity, and inclusion in our field and the larger academy, and to his enduring legacy. I think to best frame my observations, it made sense to slightly reconfigure our session theme from Black mentorship and courage to courageous Black mentorship, because that's a role that Jerome fulfilled enthusiastically for many years and from which I benefited greatly. Psychologist Jerome Bruner, a different Jerome, observed that enduring cultural community demands two things. One is shared beliefs about what people are like, what the world is like, and how things should be valued, because there must be some consensus to have a civil society. The second, just as important, is, quote, interpretive mechanisms for adjudicating, I just love that word, adjudicating, for adjudicating the different construals of reality that inevitably arise in any diverse community. That's a mouthful, but it's profound. These are truths that Jerome understood, and he
Was that you muted? Okay, there you are.
So maybe I should start over again. Sorry.
Right.
And I apologize for that.
It was just the last part, Jose. It was just like the last 10 seconds.
Oh, it just was the last 10 seconds. Okay. So you heard about part about Jerome Bruner and the interpretive mechanisms for adjudicating the different construals. These are things that Jerome understood profoundly, and he worked tirelessly to affirm. In addition, Jerome had a vision for what those interpretive mechanisms should be. A vision that was informed as much by faith as by intellect. I learned this about Jerome in a conversation we had in 2005. As the number of Latinx scholars in the PhD project grew, Jerome and I got together one time, it was at the November conference, to talk about how to best help the community remain healthy and vibrant with the increased diversity we were seeing. Of necessity, we shared our stories. And as we shared, a few things became pretty clear. First, I would never, ever be able to fully grasp what it's like to be a Black scholar or a Black person in America. I would not be able to do that. Second, he would never be able to fully grasp what it is like to be Puerto Rican in America. And third, neither one of us would ever be able to fully grasp what it was like to be Mexican or Native American or a member of another marginalized group in America. We recognized that the shared beliefs would take us only so far because the enduring vestiges of slavery differ from those of colonialism and differ again from those of imperialist exploitation. For a moment, we both wondered if a chasm could be bridged. And almost immediately, Jerome said with that inimitable chuckle of his that we could not give up, as Bill was just saying. And he highlighted two mechanisms that he believed would help us adjudicate the differences. In our souls, at least, if not fully in our intellect. He said, we have to have faith, and we need to wade in and trust one another. Faith and trust. Mechanisms. We all know they're real, even if they're hard to measure. And Jerome understood that they could only be activated by example. So he courageously enacted faith and trust with me that day. And I think he has also done it with many others of you and many other people throughout his career, both in marketing as a scholar, but also in higher education administration. That day in 2005, Jerome and I talked about faith. We hugged one another in trust, and we committed to work together as long as time and life allowed it. He was a great blessing to me. Many speaking here today knew Jerome as a brother in every sense of the word. I knew him as a courageous mentor who invited me to be his brother and to be courageous at his side as we build an enduring community that continually transforms the marketing field and higher ed and business. I am forever grateful to have Jerome as my brother and to be associated with this exceptional, courageous Black mentor. Thank you. Now is Tad, did he log in? Did Tad log in? He didn't, so Mimi?
Thank you. Thank you, Tony. First of all, good evening, everyone. I want to thank Bill Qualls and the Planning Committee for including me in this conversation. I spoke to Jerome a few days before his untimely death about participating in the original planned session about trailblazers in the discipline. We had a great conversation. about the possibility of his retirement, which I'm sure that he could never have managed, and his plans for increased research. He told me about his upcoming AMA Fellow Award, and I will forever be grateful that he was able to get that news before he passed. On the day that Jerome passed, I got a phone call from Gail. I was in a bookstore at the time, so did not pick up my phone. However, I got another 2 or 3 calls from her in quick succession. So I knew that something was very, very wrong. I called her back from the bookstore, which I never do, and she gave me the news. I was in shock after having just talked to him a few days earlier when he seemed to be fine. In fact, I was so shaken that I told her that I would have to call her back later. Now, a little history in how I met Jerome. I received my PhD in marketing from Syracuse University in 1982. At that time, I did not know of any other Black or minority PhDs in marketing other than Mel Stith and Chuck Evans, who had graduated from Syracuse in 1978 or 79. In addition to that, there was no mechanism for finding other Blacks or minorities if they existed. Research on Black consumers was just beginning to surface. Almost all of it was being written by others who often had no insight or understanding of the Black community or the Black experience, and certainly not of the diversity within the Black community. Much of that existing research focused only on the low-income segment of the market and suggested that if Blacks could just obtain more income, they would then be no different from white consumers. Thus, no real need for research into Black consumer behavior. Enter the PhD project. As you all know, the PhD project held its first conference in 1994. I attended that first meeting, as did Jerome and Bill Qualls. Imagine my shock when I met them and discovered that there were indeed Black contemporaries in the field. As you can imagine, the delight that we all felt was palpable. That began my 26-year relationship with Jerome. After that, we worked closely on projects, exchanged ideas and knowledge, met and talked at conferences, met each other's spouses, and exchanged family stories. In fact, the last time that I saw and talked with Jerome and Lillian in person was at the 25th anniversary of the PhD project in November of 2019. So Jerome's legacy as I see it, it's not just about his career and professional acclaim. Yes, that's very important, and he's to be applauded for his tenacity and commitment for doing research that focused on the issues that impacted Blacks and minorities. It was often not easy for him, especially in those early days, to forge a research path that was both meaningful to him and also had a great societal impact. But I'm not going to talk further about Jerome's professional accomplishments. All of that is available elsewhere. However, for me, an integral part of who he was a rare ability to balance career, mentorship, faith, and family. His commitment to his wife, Lillian, and to his children was visible and palpable. I almost never saw Jerome at a conference or a meeting where Lillian was also not present. And in fact, Lillian should really have a degree in marketing herself, just by osmosis. I'm going to end my comments with a poem that for me is a true reflection of Jerome. The poem is titled The Bridge Builder. An old man going a lone highway came at the evening cold and gray. to a chasm vast and deep and wide, through which was flowing a swollen tide. The old man crossed in the twilight dim. The rapids held no fears for him. But he turned when safe on the other side and built a bridge to span the tide. Old man, cried a fellow pilgrim near, you're wasting your time in building here. Your journey will end with the closing day. You never again will pass this way. You have crossed the chasm deep and wide. Why build you this bridge at eventide? The builder lifted his old gray head. Good friend, in the path I have come, he said, there follows after me today a youth whose feet must pass this way. This stream, which has been as naught to me, to that fair youth may a pitfall be. He too must cross in the twilight dim. Good friend, I am building this bridge for him. That is Jerome. That is the legacy of Jerome. It lies in the mentorship and the lifting of others, and particularly younger colleagues in our discipline. It is also a challenge for all of us to follow in his footsteps and to be bridge builders ourselves. Thank you. And now I want to pass the mic to Sonya Grier.
Thank you, Mimi. That was beautiful. That was really nice. It's hard to follow that. It's, you know, this whole situation is bittersweet, but I'm really feel privileged to be here. So I met Jerome in 1992 during the first year of my doctoral program. And I wasn't going to tell the story, but it's a story I wrote in the letter for the Irwin Award, as well as I told it in that video. And I think it's really relevant given what we've heard so far. And this is, you know, Jerry and I were first year doctoral students, and we decided that we needed role models. We wanted, you know, faculty who were interested in the type of research we were interested in, and who were, you know, who would support us in doing that kind of work. And so we started developing a list of Black marketing professors. And this is 1992, before the PhD project. And we started emailing them. And the first person to respond was Jerome. And so we went to our dean and said, you know, we've got this Black professor who, you know, wants to meet with us and is willing to meet with us. Can we get some money and bring him in and have a Black speaker series? And Dean Jacobs said, okay, that's fine. So I go to pick up Jerome at the hotel, and I'm walking up to him, and he's standing there in his suit with, you know, a trench coat on and everything. And just as I'm getting to him, this lady comes up to him, throws him her keys, and says something like, I'm late, I'll come back and get the ticket. And she just walks away. And her car's sitting there running, and I'm walking up like, oh my God, this is horrible. This has just happened to our speaker. He's been stereotyped. And I walk up to him and he goes, so what kind of car do you have? Hers is nicer, we should just take that one. And he laughed, and we both laughed. And, you know, he made this joke about being stereotyped, and then he used that same story as he opened his talk at Northwestern to faculty and PhD students about ethnic marketing. And it was, you know, it was like a lesson, a master class, to see someone be basically face this microaggression and then laugh about it, and then turn it into a real humane and respectful way of presenting his research. And I would say over the last 30 years, that's what I've seen, you know, from Jerome. And there's another small story that Bill made me think of when he talked about how he goes to finish something. And we had a project on fear appeals that we were presenting at ACR in Hong Kong. And this was Jerome, Jerry, and Danelle Briley and myself. And we just could never get together to analyze the data or anything. And there we were the night before the presentation with no data analysis for this presentation. But there we were at 2 or 3 in the morning, analyzing the data with Jerome. And I remember we were just like, he's a professor, you know, we're all these junior assistant professor, like he's a professor and he's with us in the middle of the night analyzing data in Hong Kong in somebody's hotel room. So those types of, you know, stories really have taught me a lot over time about being a marketing scholar. And although we have several papers together, most of my collaborations with Jerome have not been about publishing research. They've been much more about improving some aspect of equity in the field. And Jerome has constantly worked to support colleagues and to really make the marketing field better, whether it's getting more diverse research published, helping that research get in front of decision makers, finding ways to capture the history of Blacks in marketing, increasing faculty diversity, increasing doctoral student diversity, trying to find support for that student whose advisor abandoned them, or other projects in the field, really, and especially trying to support doctoral students and junior faculty. He has really made the marketing field a better place. And so his loss leaves a big void in the field, especially when the field is now starting to awake to the importance of the topics that he studied so passionately for so long. And he also made the marketing field really a better place for me. He was one of the first Black professors I met after Marcus Alexis, who I knew already because he was at Northwestern. But think about being in a field and never to see anyone who looks like you. And then to meet someone who not only looks like you, but also does the same type of research as you and is interested in supporting and working with you. I mean, that was just amazing. So over the last 30 years that I've known him, he's been, a primary role model on how to do research that one cares about, how to support and develop other people, and how to really make change in the field in multiple ways. So thank you. Sorry, now I hand it over to Vanessa.
Thank you, Sonya. Also very beautiful words. It is an honor to have the opportunity to share my reflections about Jerome, who was a friend, colleague, supporter, mentor, motivator, voice of reason, and very much like family since 1998. I attribute a great deal of my growth and opportunities to his profound influence over the last 24 or so years. I was deeply honored to receive the Williams Qualls Spratlin Award in 2020, and I am even more humbled and grateful now. My first real memory of Jerome was at the Marketing and Public Policy Conference, which was in DC in 1998. It was my first conference in marketing, and I was presenting a paper with Paul Bloom. Jerome came to my presentation and afterwards introduced himself. Through Paul, I was familiar with Jerome's work as someone who was an expert on racial issues in marketing, although that may be the only time race was mentioned during my entire doctoral program experience. Over the years, I got to know Jerome and Lillian, and sometimes other members of their family at conferences, always Marketing and Public Policy, Cross-Cultural Research Conference, ACR, AMA, MDSA, and PhD project. As a doctoral student, Jerome made it a point to ask how I was doing, what I was working on. He offered his assistance at every step, when I was on the market, through the review process, during the tenure process, and beyond. He never missed one of my presentations. He never failed to ask good questions and make suggestions for future research. And if he had to miss something, usually because he had a session at the same time, he would always ask for a copy of the paper and always send comments. He was always available to answer my desperate cries for help, and there were many of those. I don't know what to do about fill in the blank, this paper, my colleagues, my role as department chair, being an administrator, etc. And despite my often grumpy, boisterous, and combative reactions, he was always so even-tempered, reasonable, careful, but steadfast in his support. He took his mentorship very seriously. And as I started to become a mentor to others, he, in his quiet and unassuming way, insisted that those of us in our extended cohort do right by those who were coming along behind us. Honestly, I always felt kind of like an outcast among the mainstream marketing academic crowd at conferences. But Jerome always found a way to make sure that I was part of activities. They could be roundtables, special sessions, special issues. He always made sure that wherever we were, we had a family dinner, which were some of my fondest memories. And after parties, we had great times doing karaoke at Jerry's house in DC and at ACR in Baltimore in 2014 when Jerome rented a private room and threw an after party at a nightclub. I've never seen Jerome in a bad mood or disenchanted. He was always calm and measured and humble. And regularly at conferences, I would run into him early in the morning, first thing. Of course, I'd be just getting back from partying from the night before, and he would be in the lobby or out front stretching to get ready for his morning run. And he would just laugh at me and say, shake his head and say, yeah, I'll see you at the session. So one funny story, the only time I ever saw Jerome look mildly uncomfortable was one year at the cross-cultural research conference. It happened to be in Jamaica. Quinetta Robertson, who many of you know from management, and I were headed out to a nightclub with Jerome's son, Dante. So most parents would have said, you better make sure my child comes back in one piece or else. Jerome just said, although I hope you all have a good time, I'm sure that I don't have to remind you that the safety of my son is of utmost importance. And I said, oh, don't worry, Jerome, he's safe with us. And that's when this look of fear and horror came over his face. So I promised to keep this short and light. This has been a real difficult time. But I keep telling myself that Jerome is with Jerry, and they are organizing a special session in the sky. There's a rolling deadline. And when the time comes, I hope my work gets accepted. So thank you. I'll now turn it over to Dr. Americus Reed.
Thanks, Vanessa. That was absolutely beautiful. I didn't prepare a statement formally. I wanted to just share what I feel inside right now because I'm still in shock, to be perfectly honest. And, my heart still hurts because, Jerome was so special to myself and to obviously everyone on this call, and even, of course, beyond this call. So, for me, the realization that I lost such an important aspect of my life is still not quite with me yet. It still hasn't quite settled in. But I want to say a few things because as this kid from East Point, Georgia, I don't think anyone thought that I would ever be kind of a professor of anything, really. And as my career trajectory started, I was in the same mode as many of you guys in the sense of really looking for a familiar face, a friendly face, a face that could help mentor me and inspire me. And when I look back, I look back on the greatness of Jerome Williams. And Jerome was the kind of guy who, like everyone says here, was just full of joy. His energy, whenever you saw him and you had a conversation with him, you felt a little bit better afterwards. You left that conversation feeling like you could conquer. You were stronger. You were more inspired. You were elevated. And for me, as I look back and I think about the really key mentors in my life, the Williams, the Qualls, the Spratlins, the Evans, the DeShields, the Stamps, the original gangsters, as I like to think about them, the people who were doing the work and kicking down that door long before I ever showed up. I think about that, the power of that motivational impetus and that mentorship. And for me, Jerome was a special person in my life because we shared not only a professional overlap in terms of the University of Pennsylvania and the fact that he was pioneering as an undergraduate years ago, but also the fact that he really stood out to me as not just an academic role model, but also a very powerful mentor. And this really came to head last year in 2020 when I lost my father. And I remember the day my dad passed. And I remember sharing that with close friends and colleagues. And Jerome called me. And as he always does, reaching out to say, you know, hey, I'm here for you. And whatever you need, my brother. Sorry. And that really was a moment for me, because I realized that not only was he a great man in terms of what he meant to me academically and as a role model, but also as a father figure. And so in that sense, he stepped right in that space and let me know in the most authentic and caring and genuine way that, you know, you're going to be okay, guy. You're going to be all right. And I'm here for you. And so for me, Jerome will always hold that incredibly special place in my heart because of the type of man that he was and the types of things that he did, right? Because there's two elements of that really tells you the type of character a person has. One is, what are they willing to do to help others outside of the spotlight? And Jerome really was that kind of angel on our wings, in the sense that he was always looking out for us. And I appreciate that deeply in my soul. The other element I think is important is, what do people say when you're gone? What are the thoughts and sentiments? What is the legacy that people reflect on? And I can tell you that, as is obvious here, that the love, the outpouring, and the care of what he meant to all of us, as he treated us as unique, special individuals, like almost as his own kids or grandkids, that it really tells me a lot about the type of life that he lived. And kind of as what Vanessa's saying, I'm hoping I can get close to that standard when it's all said and done. And I'm hoping that, you know, I can live a life that can attempt to replicate and mirror the quality of the interactions and the love that Jerome gave us all. So, you know, although I'm deeply saddened and my heart is broken, I'm also consoled by the fact that, you know, one day I'm going to get to see him again. And yeah. And Jerome, I miss you, my brother. I love you, man. And that's how I feel. Let me turn it over to Maura.
Thank you, Americus, for those words. Thank you, Kevin, Gail, and Eli, for giving me a chance to say a few things and to be a part of this. I prepared some things because I thought that would help me walk through this. I got to meet Jerome for the first time in 2003 as a PhD project student, but I really got to know Jerome in 2007 when he came to FSU, or to Arizona State, for the Chef Consortium. And my then boyfriend, now husband, Martin, and I got to host Jerome and also Bill Qualls. And it was such a big deal for us to get to chauffeur them around in our little, we had a little Volkswagen convertible, and it was like, we were just over the moon to get to show those two men around Tempe. And one of the things that always stood out to me about Jerome is that he was just such a dignified person. I always perceived him, Bill, the others as these elders in our community, and really looked up to them and still do. One of the reasons that Kevin invited me today was to sort of also be here to represent the AMA Academic Council, and Jerome is a part of that too. He was this demonstration that I think we all see of what could be possible. You know, he was often the first or one of the first, but he made this point and commitment of saying that he wouldn't be the last one of us to walk through those doors. He was on the AMA board of directors. He chaired the AMA Foundation. He used those positions to make the field as a whole better, but also to help each of us in our careers. And there's so many friends that have had that same experience with him. When I spoke with him and when we would talk, we often talked about the importance of making sure that we shared opportunities with others as we had the chance to do so. And I'm really inspired by that way that he lived across his life and career. About a decade after that, first time I got to hang out with Bill Qualls and Jerome, in 2017, I got to co-chair a conference with Jerome and also Sterling Bone. We got to co-chair the Marketing and Public Policy Conference. And we had such a great time. I mean, those two men were really inspiring to me. I got to learn a lot about Jerome's values, and we were able to do some really cool things, like let our values merge with our work. And so, for instance, one of the things we decided on as a group is we said, look, there's always another cocktail hour. If we get money from our schools, we're not going to spend it on cocktails. We're going to get a really cool headliner speaker. And we were able to get Bob Woodward as our keynote speaker because we just made a choice. And Jerome was a big part of that. These are just some examples, but these are the reasons that he got the 2018 Marketing and Society SIG Lifetime Achievement Award, why he's an AMA fellow now. I want to share a couple other things. In 2019, I had a chance to co-chair the Transformative Consumer Research Conference here in Tallahassee with Martin, my husband. And what was really special about that is both Jerome and Jerry Henderson were an important part of that event. They were an active part of that community for years, and they were both there and made important contributions, not just to the intellectual discussion, but to the culture and to setting this norm of supporting and helping to bring the best out of the other people that were there. I want to mention that Jerome and Jerry both have papers coming out from that conference in April of 2021. Both of those papers are focused on marketplace, diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is, you know, a big part of their life's work. They were doing that kind of work before people were paying attention to it. And so I think it's something wonderful that both Jerry and Jerome have these papers coming out in a couple months in the Journal of Public Policy and Marketing. So I hope you'll take a look at them. The last time I spoke with Jerome was a couple of days before he passed away. And I mean, just in his true form, he was calling from the hospital because he was worried about other people and he wanted to look out for other people. And, we didn't talk on the phone regularly, but, maybe 4 or 5 times a year. But he called me to say, he was worried about making sure that his hospitalization, which he was fully expecting to be released from the hospital, not affect or delay anyone else's work. And so he wanted me to reassign some of his papers and things like that, because it was weighing on him that he didn't want to slow anybody else down. And during that conversation, one of the jokes that we had is that, I just hold this man in such high esteem. And, I always am a little bit deferential to him. And, that that's kind of the opposite of who Jerome is. He's such a humble and modest person, but I just couldn't help myself. That's just how I perceive this wonderful mentor and elder. And so I would always drop everything if he called. And I would always tell him, Jerome, you're a VIP. If you call, I'm dropping everything and I'm going to, jump in and help out. You've done so much for all of us. And it would just always make him giggle. So one of the things that I really treasure is in that last conversation, I was able to make him chuckle a little bit about that, even though he was hospitalized. And as I've shared with some others, and I know that many of you guys feel the same way, it's like you just don't know that that's going to be your last conversation with someone. And, I think if I understood that, I would certainly have been even more explicit in my gratitude toward this incredibly kind, gentle, and generous person. And I mean, I will miss him dearly. I know all of us will miss him very much. And I think what we have to do is what we can do to honor him is to really try to follow that example as much as possible, lift up the people coming behind us, try to give opportunities to others when we have a chance to do so, and try to be that positive light the way he was in our discipline. Thank you. And now over to Aziza.
Thank you, Maura. It warms my heart to hear all of these memories of Dr. Williams and everyone's unique relationships and interactions with him. I'd like to add a few of my own, as Dr. Williams was a dear mentor, colleague, and most of all, friend of mine. As I was introduced, my name is Aziza Jones, and I'm a PhD candidate in the marketing department at Rutgers University, where Dr. Williams was a professor and the former provost. So I'll be speaking from that perspective. Also, I will be referring to him as Dr. Williams because that's who he's always been to me and who he will always continue to be. I met Dr. Williams when he was the director of the PhD program at Rutgers, and we scheduled a phone call to discuss my PhD application to Rutgers. He encouraged me to meet with him in person and visit campus, so I flew out of my hometown in Illinois to Jersey, and my mother, preparing for her last child to move out of state, accompanied me. Now, my mother and I planned on her waiting in the lobby while Dr. Williams and I had our meeting. And when Dr. Williams came down to meet me, I had the usual nerves that one might have before an initial interview. So I shakily introduced myself and my mother to him. Now, although I thought that she would wait there until he and I returned, Dr. Williams invited her up to the meeting with us. He didn't want to leave her out. To say that my nerves were exasperated at the idea of my mother coming along for what was essentially an interview with me is an understatement. Nevertheless, we went upstairs to his office and he began to ask me about myself. I answered his questions as he smiled. And when I mentioned that I mostly grew up in Illinois, his eyes lit up. He mentioned that he had spent some time in his youth in Illinois. And before I knew it, my mother was chiming in too, because she grew up in Illinois mostly as well. We all gabbed about our memories of our childhoods to the point that we lost track of time. And by the end of that meeting, my nerves had faded, and I was able to see Dr. Williams for who he was, a kind, open, family-oriented man who would do whatever he could to make others feel included and at home when in his care. Over the years, while at Rutgers, I saw how this identity guided his every move. Throughout my time, he did his best to make sure that not only I felt included in the broader Rutgers community, but that also other Black, Chinese, and Korean students felt at home while so far away from their families. Dr. Williams was the champion of equality and inclusion at Rutgers, as he reached across disciplines to make sure that every student felt cared for, embraced, and loved. He would seek out those who felt alone or rejected and give them safety and comfort and inclusion. And he had a way of forming a unique relationship with each and every one of us, inspiring us to greatness. I remember meeting with him to update him on my progress in the program, and he asked me what school I'd like to go to for my first academic placement. I looked at him and said I wanted to go to a Big Ten school, but that would never happen. He looked at me and said, "You can absolutely go there," as if there wasn't a doubt in his mind. And about 3 months ago today, I received a job offer from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, a Big Ten school and my alma mater. I know without a shadow of a doubt that this dream became a reality because of his encouragement, his guidance, and his friendship. And I am not alone in this. There are countless students who share this sentiment and who came to and loved Rutgers because he was there, believing in us when we lost confidence, cheering for us sometimes when no one else was, and pulling a greatness out of us that we didn't know was there. One of the last things that Dr. Williams and I did together was to submit his nomination for me for the Patricia Cross Future Leaders Award. I was so floored that Dr. Williams, who among all of his many responsibilities and students inside and outside of Rutgers, saw this opportunity and took the time to nominate me. His last email said to me, and I quote, "Regardless of whether or not you receive this award, you're still tops in my book." He also told me jokingly that for the effort I owed he and his wife dinner. So, Mrs. Williams, I owe you a dinner. This is who I knew Dr. Williams to be, a man who saw only greatness in each and every one of us, and who would do all that he could to make it a reality. He was a man who would inspire the most timid among us to shoot for the moon and actually land on it. This loss is incredibly difficult for our academic community, but I hope that each precious day that we are alive, that we embody him, that we see excellence in each other and we bring it out. I challenge us to welcome others into our academic community, just as he did so effortlessly, that we find those who have lost their way or who don't feel included and show them that we believe, just as Dr. Williams did, that greatness lies within them. Let's cherish and encourage each other as the academic community that he knew that we could be. We are so blessed for having met this wonderful, amazing man, and a part of him will live on in our hearts. Thank you. And with that, I will pass the virtual microphone to Dr. Nakeisha Lewis.
All right. Sounds good. I was attempting to set up Aziza. I have a very similar story with my mom, quite frankly. So it looks like he invites up moms to make everyone uncomfortable is what it was like, is my understanding. So with that being said, I had a PowerPoint, but it's looking like my PowerPoint is telling me it will not do that. So I'll just share and hopefully be able to describe some of the things or pictures that I have on here. So quick deal. Jerome has been this idea of mentor, family, and I would even say a world shaker. Mentor, of course, when we were to look it up, it would be an experienced or trusted advisor. And by experience, we're talking, you know, you all have seen the Vita, loads upon loads of pages of excellent research and countless papers that Jerome has written, theories he's developed, and et cetera. And so I think back to the first encounter I even had with Jerome. And for me, it started September 10th, 2004. I looked it up just to be sure. And the first email I got was from the University of Texas at Austin. I guess they had sent him my name, letting him know that I was interested, I was applying, whatever that may be. And the email kind of went like this. I heard that you were interested in UT. They sent me your name. Let's talk about it. And I was like, I don't know who this guy is, but it sounds great if the university is contacting me. I am on the right track. And so I go through all of these things where I'm trying to explain to him, you know, this is what I did for my master's work, and this is what I think I want to do. And he responds back with this email of list of articles I could read that happened to be many of his articles because he was the one that wrote about what I wanted to study. Now, the interesting part was my master's work had cited him time and time again, but I didn't know that was this person that I was actually talking to. So I was now embarrassed because I was looking to give some sort of feedback to show how much I knew. And in fact, I was talking to the person that knew it all, is what I found. So I'm there, we got this email going, and he is emailing me back over and over again, sharing the experience about UT and what's going on there. And I'm left in this space of just trying to get a better understanding of what a PhD does and what does all that happen. And so I get to UT, I'm accepted there, and I realize that Jerome is the best way I can categorize it isn't a question. I just want to figure out how many hours did he have in a day, because I clearly didn't have the same amount of hours that he had to be as productive and also have time for family and also have time for impact that Jerome had. And so I literally think of it in the way of he could do the family thing, he did the faith thing well, and he understood the value of future. And by future, I look at everybody that's on this call, and I think about all of the impact that we hope to have one day to show the work that Jerome invested in us. And I am just overwhelmed. I have a picture in front of me that I really wanted to share with you all, and it's from my graduation. And what it looks like, it's my dad, who's like 6'4". He's from Chula, Mississippi. He's a really big, chocolatey guy. And then you see my mom, and then you see me in the center, and then you see Jerry, who was my academic mom. So I got that privilege of that. And then Jerome, who was my academic dad. Now I'm an only child. So for my parents to be willing to share me with anyone was a big deal. But I think about my dads on one side, my birth dad, and then my academic dad on the other side. And I think about how blessed I was to have these people that were willing to invest so much time, right? Jerome was willing to spend and share his family with me. He was willing to support in research. I recall at conferences we would go to, and I would try to explain that, what if my hip hop research doesn't fit? Or what if my stuff on it? And he would always say, it's okay, we're gonna walk in the room and you're gonna do it. It's gonna be amazing and it's gonna be fine. And I think through really how he didn't have to, right? He didn't have to take that time out. And for me, that is something that is absolutely beyond compare. The other thing that, as I reflect on my time with Jerome, I think about how not only was he a history maker, but he was a maker of history makers. And so as I look at the different screens on this call and the different impacts that we've made across the world, I think every time we do something, we're a reflection of a history maker making history makers. And so I want to end with something quick, because I promised myself I would not cry in front of all of you lovely people today, and that's probably the easiest way I can do it. And so I say this as my final thoughts. Jerome didn't rise alone. He took all of us with him. He taught us that making history was simply the beginning of who we were. We'll never forget your sacrifice and support, so we'll soar in every role that we get. We'll give back to every young scholar we can. We'll use our research to speak out. We'll make as much impact as possible on the way, because that's exactly what you would have expected and wanted from us. Jerome, we will miss you, but we will never, never forget you. It is such a privilege and honor to speak about some of my experiences as someone who not only changed academia, but who changed the world. And every conference paper, every research publication, every time we're in front of a classroom, every time, whatever it is, that thing that we do it knowing that we're making impact, because we learn from the best.
Amen.
Thank you for my time. I'll hand that back off to Eli. I hope you all have a great night.
Thank you, Nakeisha. Thank you all. This was very, very powerful, a celebration and inspiration. Thank you so much. Well, it looks like we kept time well. I know we have a lot to say about Jerome. We actually have time for just 3 more folks. And Srinath, you want to go? And then DT.
Thank you, Eli. This is a sad and happy moment, honestly. I was shocked when I got this news. And I'm Srinath Gopalakrishna from the University of Missouri. I was a young faculty member. I met Jerome at Penn State first time when it was 1988. And amazingly, as I've made my mark in the field in the domain of B2B trade shows. And I'm remembering the day that he made this impact. He was the one who was actually responsible for me to get into this field, honestly. There was a meeting of the Institute for the Study of Business Markets in Boston, and we had booked our tickets to go and attend that meeting. And I was running a fever that evening, actually. And he said, you know, Srinath, it's okay. Come along. I think this is a great opportunity. Why don't you come over and I'll take over the rest of the work, but you come along. And guess what? We took the trip. I was not feeling very good that day, but we ended up in that meeting. And from there, I was able to build such a huge research database. Jerome was a part of every step of the way, trying to help me along. And we were collaborators on so many projects. 2 of them ended up in the top journals in marketing. One of them was a JM publication, and one of them in the International Journal of Research and Marketing. So I have very owing a deep debt of gratitude to him for staying the course, for keeping me focused and encouraging me along the way, because it was hard, and it's still hard, to get published in these top journals. I was always looking up to him for his mentorship. He was a very, very encouraging colleague in the Penn State marketing department. Always very kind and considering empathy. He would want to learn about my Indian culture. He would come with me to the Indian grocery store, and he would say, hey, what is this and what is that? And he would try to read the names of the Indian movies. He'd say, what does that word mean? And then, he came along with me to my brother's house in New Jersey, and he wanted to meet my dad, who was visiting from India. And I was just amazed at how much empathy he would show, how much compassion he would show for all of the things that I was able to do early in my career. So, I mean, we know his family very well. We know Lillian very well, and my wife joins me in conveying our condolences. I'm really it's ironic that I'm working today on this chapter in the B2B handbook that's about to come out next year with Gary Lillian, who's one of my colleagues. And we were remembering Jerome Williams just a few days ago, because we had written this joint article that appeared in JM. And then a couple of moments later, I see this announcement from the AMA that he's no more, and I was just shocked to hear it. But again, like everyone before me has said today, you have spoken so eloquently. I was so happy to hear all these great tributes. He will live on. He will live on in our hearts, and he'll be an inspiration for every one of us who aspires to be a better individual. So thank you again, Eli. I appreciate your opportunity for having me able to speak here for a few words.
Thank you, Srinath. Thank you very much. Thank you. DT?
Yeah, a couple of quick stories. Some of you may know some of this, and if you were on the Rutgers call, you heard a little more, but I've known Jerome since I was a doctoral student, and Jerry and I were doctoral students around the same time. I was about a year or so ahead of her. Anyway, I get Jerome contacts me and tells me that he's in play at Rutgers Camden. And Rutgers, for those of you who don't or are not aware, we have 3 campuses: Newark, New Brunswick, which is the business school courses both, and then we have Camden. And the provost at Camden was trying to hire Jerome, and I was like, there's no way Jerome's going to come to Rutgers and go to Camden. We need him here in Newark, New Brunswick. And so I told the provost that I was going to get Jerome, that he wasn't going to be successful in getting Jerome. As it turns out, he wasn't. We brought him to Rutgers, Newark, New Brunswick. And that was wonderful. Then Jerome and I colluded to get Jerry there. And we were able to make that happen, even though we didn't have a marketing department at the time. we brought Jerome into the management department, and we put Jerry in that department as well for a period of time until she moved over to marketing. So we get an invitation to go to this party that Russell Simmons was having for Serena Williams. So Jerome and I head over there, and as it happens, we started talking to this guy, and it turns out this guy was works very closely with Russell, but he knew some folks in the Obama administration, and he was very intrigued with the work I was doing with the center. And I had made Jerome, I guess, the academic director for the center. And so as a result of that conversation, we ended up having the first ever White House Summit on urban entrepreneurship, which turned out to be extremely impactful, made a big difference. Jerome was just a wonderful colleague. He became the doctoral director, and I think, and Marie might be able to confirm this, I think we had the most PhD project doctoral students of any other school. But we would work together to make sure we could bring these students in. We had a situation where one of our Caucasian faculty members was very upset that Jerome was supporting a young African-American woman to be in the doctoral program, and she had her people that she wanted. And then she tried to accuse Jerome of racism, which was utterly ridiculous. Anyway, he prevailed. We brought in this woman. She successfully completed the program. Jerome and I were her co-chairs till I left Rutgers. I stayed on the committee, but then he and Jeff, I think, became her co-chairs. But he just, he was very supportive of, as you guys all know, he's going to be greatly missed. I mean, he was just such a force, a positive force in the lives of so many people. And what he did extended way beyond just us and how we deal with our students and other folks in the field of research, but just as a human being. He was impactful in all areas. And he will be missed. He was a lot of fun to be around. And I had a chance to see him do his dog and pony dancing, singing show. He and Jerry put on, when I left Rutgers, put on a goodbye ceremony for me, and they sang. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you, DT. Thank you all. Thank you all for speaking. Let's keep the Williams family in our thoughts and prayers, of course. I want to give a shout out to my partner over there, Gail. Gail, thank you so much for your help here moderating. We also want to thank Kevin Bradford for organizing this. KB, thank you so much for putting this together. We appreciate you. We want to thank Monica Gerhardt from AMA for giving us the time and the support. Thank you so much, Monica. Marie, it's always good to see someone from the PhD project. Marie, thank you for being here. At this time, I'm going to turn it back over to Kevin Bradford. KB?
Yes, as we close out, I just want to thank everyone for their attendance. Thank you for the love that you've shown for Jerome. The challenge is very clear, right? This is a big void that we can only hope to fill. And I know that we can do this together. And this is the start of something very special, and just, understanding what we're missing. And so thank you for so eloquently providing everyone with reflections about Jerome. Thank you for your time tonight. And again, I challenge you to contribute at the level that Jerome has, specifically for the communities that you belong to. Okay, and so thank you again, and thank you for your time.